Time for dinner. Judges 14. And Shimshon went down to Timnah, and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. And he went up and informed his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines, and now take her for me a wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there no woman among the daughters of your brothers, or among all my people, that you should take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? And Shimshon said to his father, Take her from me, for she is pleasing in my eyes. However, his father and mother did not know that it was of Jehovah, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines were ruling over Israel. Then Shimshon went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and came to the vineyards of Timnah, and saw a young lion roaring as it met him. And the Spirit of Jehovah came mightily upon him, and he tore it apart as the tearing apart of a young goat with naught in his hand. But he did not make known to his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and spoke to the woman, and she pleased Shimshon well. And when he returned later to take her, he turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion, and saw a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took some of it in his hands, and went along eating. And he came to his father and mother, and gave them, and they ate. But he did not make known to them that he took the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down to the woman, and Shimshon gave a feast there, for young men used to do so. And it came to be, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Shimshon said to them, Please let me put forth a riddle to you. If you clearly solve and explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, then I shall give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of garments. But if you are unable to explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen shirts and 30 changes of garments. And they said to him, Put forth your riddle and let us hear it. So he said to them, Out of the eater came forth food, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And for 3 days they were unable to explain the riddle. And it came to be on the 7th day that they said to Shimshon's wife, Entice your husband to explain the riddle to us, or else we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Is it not? And Shimshon's wife wept before him and said, You only hate me, and you do not love me. You have put forth a riddle to the sons of my people, but you have not explained it to me. And he said to her, Look, I have not explained it to my father or my mother, and should I explain it to you? And she had wept before him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came to be on the 7th day that he informed her, because she pressed him so much. She then explained the riddle to the sons of her people. And the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than the lion? And he said to them, If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not solved my riddle. Then the Spirit of Jehovah came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon, and struck 30 of their men, stripped them, and gave the changes of garments to those who had explained the riddle. And his displeasure burned, and he went back up to his father's house. And Shimshon's wife was given to his companion, who had been his friend. And it came to be after some time, in the days of wheat harvest, that Shimshon visited his wife with a young goat. And he said, Let me go into my wife into her room. But her father would not permit him to go in. And her father said, Indeed, I thought that you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her instead." And Shimshon said to them, "This time I am blameless regarding the Philistines, if I do evil to them." And Shimshon went and caught 300 foxes, and took torches and turned them tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails, and set the torches on fire, and sent them out into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burned up both the shocks and the standing grain, even the vineyards and olive trees. And the Philistines said, "Who did this?" And they answered, "Shimshon, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took away his wife and gave her to his companion." Then the Philistines went up and burned her and her father with fire. And Shimshon said to them, "Though you do this, yet I shall take revenge on you, and after that I cease." And he struck them hip and thigh, a great slaughter, and went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. And the Philistines then went up and encamped in Yehudah and spread out against Lehi. And the men of Yehudah said, "Why have you come up against us?" And they answered, "We have come up to bind Shimshon, to do to him as he has done to us." Then 3,000 men of Yehudah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam and said to Shimshon, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? Why have you done this to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I did to them." And they said to him, "We have come down to bind you, to give you into the hand of the Philistines." And Shimshon said to them, "Swear to me not to fall on me yourselves." And they spoke to him, saying, "No, but we are certainly going to bind you, and shall give you into their hand, but certainly not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him from the rock. And when he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him, and the Spirit of Jehovah came mightily upon him. And the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it, and struck 1,000 men with it. And Shimshon said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, 1 heap, 2 heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey I have stricken 1,000 men." And it came to be, when he had ended speaking, that he threw the jawbone from his hand, and called that place Ramath Lehi. And he became very thirsty, and cried out to Jehovah, and said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now am I to die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised?" And Elohim split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank. And his spirit came back, and he revived. So he called its name En Hakor, which is in Lehi to this day. And he ruled Yisrael 20 years in the days of the Philistines. And Shimshon went to Azah, and saw a woman there, a whore, and went into her. The Azathites, saying, "Shimshon has come here." So they went round and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city, and kept silent all day, saying, "In the morning, when it is daylight, then we shall kill him." Now Shimshon lay until midnight, and rose at midnight, and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city, and the 2 gate posts, and pulled them up with the bar, put them on his shoulders, and took them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. And it came to be afterward that he loved a woman in the Wadi Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the princes of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Entice him, and find out where his great strength lies, and see by what we might overpower him. Then we shall bind him to humble him, and let us give you, each one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Shimshon, Please reveal to me where your great strength lies, and by what you might be bound to humble you. And Shimshon said to her, If they bind me with 7 fresh cords, yet not dried, then I shall be weak and be like any other man. And the princes of the Philistines then brought her 7 fresh cords, not yet dried, and she bound him with them. And while those lying in wait stayed with her in the room, and she said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. But he broke the cords as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches fire. So the secret of his strength remained unknown. And Delilah said to Shimshon, Look, you have mocked me and spoken lies to me. Now, please reveal to me what you might be bound. And he said to her, If they bind me tightly with new ropes that have never been used, then I shall be weak and be like any other man. And Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. And those lying in wait were sitting in the inner room, but he broke them off his arms like a thread. So Delilah said to Shimshon, Until now you have mocked me and spoken lies to me. Reveal to me how you might be bound. And he said to her, If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web. Then she fastened it with a pin and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. But he awoke from his sleep and pulled out the pin of the loom and the web. And then she said to him, How do you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not made known to me where your great strength lies. And it came to be when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, so that his being was wearied to death, that he made known to her all his heart, and said to her, No razor has ever come upon my head, for I have never been a Nazirite to Elohim from my mother's womb. It says, For I have been a Nazirite to Elohim from my mother's womb. If I were shaven, then my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. And Delilah saw that he had made known to her all his heart, and she sent and called for the princes of the Philistines, saying, Come up once more, for he has made known to me all his heart. So the princes of the Philistines came up to her and brought the silver in their hand. And she made him sleep on her knees, and called for a man, and shaved off the 7 locks of his head. Thus she began to humble him, and his strength left him. And she said, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. And he awoke from his sleep and said, Let me go out as before, at other times, and shake myself loose. But he did not know that Jehovah had turned aside from him. So the Philistines took him and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Azah, and bound him with bronze shackles, and he became a grinder in the prison. And the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaven. And the princes of the Philistines gathered to slaughter a great slaughtering to Dagon, their mighty one, and to rejoice. And they said, Our mighty one has given Shimshon our enemy into our hands. And the people saw him and praised their mighty one, for they said, Our mighty one has given into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, who slew many of us. And it came to be when their hearts were glad that they said, Call for Shimshon and let him entertain us. So they called for Shimshon from the prison, and he entertained them, and they made him stand between the columns. And Shimshon said to the young man who was holding his hand, Let me alone, and let me feel the columns which support the house, so that I lean on them. And the house was filled with men and women, and all the princes of the Philistines were there. And about 3,000 men and women were on the roof, and watched Shimshon entertaining. And Shimshon called to Jehovah, saying, O Master Jehovah, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, only this time, O Elohim, and let me avenge myself on the Philistines with vengeance for my 2 eyes. And Shimshon took hold of the 2 middle columns which supported the house, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other on his left. And Shimshon said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself mightily, and the house fell on the princes and all the people in it. And the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his life. And his brothers and all his family's household came down and took him, and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, in the burial site of his father Manoah. And he had ruled Yisrael 20 years.